Wonderful. We're on our fifth sermon now on Fried and Frazzled. And for those who are new with us, we have been walking a journey on trying to learn how to live with the sense of overwhelm that is the reality of life today. There's so much going on in our lives that we are always feeling overwhelmed by life. And burnout today isn't just a matter of the work I do. That contributes, yes. But it is so many other things because there are so many areas of our lives we're not coping in. We've got too many responsibilities. Life is too fast. The speed of it is such that we just aren't coping. And it's leading us to the place of exhaustion and possibly even potentially to burnout itself. And I'm trying to share with all of us the lessons I have learned since I burnt out 2 years ago and what the road of recovery has been. And I want to take us back today to the book of Genesis, because you remember we started with looking at Genesis to see how God himself works, because he says, walk with me, work with me, and I will show you how to take a real rest. In other words, follow my example. And we looked at Genesis, or 4 principles that we drew out of Genesis, but I promised you that I would come back to a 5th principle, and that's what I want to do today, to look at the principle of the Sabbath from the very beginning of creation. But let me begin by telling you a story. It's a myth, okay? A Greek mythology story of a king who was called Sisyphus. He was known to be a great trickster and a liar. So much so that he cheated the god of death twice. He evaded death by tricking the god of death. At one time, he even managed, on the second attempt that the god of death took to try and take away his life, he managed to trick the god of death and tie him up and hold him in bondage. Finally, Zeus, who is, like the top of the pile, god in the Greek mythology, Zeus finally got tired of King Sisyphus. And so Zeus freed the god of death, but then captured Sisyphus himself and decided to teach him a lesson because of his trickery. He decided to throw him into the underworld, Hades, or what we would say is hell, the place of torment and punishment. And there he gave him an eternal punishment. And the punishment was that he took a huge rock, big as or even bigger than Sisyphus himself, took a huge rock and placed it on his back. Now this rock was actually an enchanted rock. Magical. It was an enchanted rock. And the work that Sisyphus was to do was to roll this rock to the top of a hill in the hope that when he got to the top, that he would be freed from the rock itself. And so Sisyphus would get up in the morning and he would push and huff and puff and roll that rock up to the top of the hill. But as he got to the top of the hill, because this was an enchanted rock, somehow the rock would evade him and would slip by him and roll back to the bottom of the hill. And Sisyphus would have to go down and put his back to the rock, and he would begin the journey of rolling the rock up the hill, slowly huffing and puffing to the top of the hill. But when he got there, the rock would somehow evade him, and it would roll back to the bottom of the hill. This was his eternal punishment. The futile effort of labor that was going to be unending. May I suggest that many of us in today's world live a life like Sisyphus. So we feel like Sisyphus, unending stress. Even when we try and manage it, it always seems to come back. Unending busyness. Even when we have cleared the desk or the deck, it seems to come back. You remember the many times you have said, if I can just survive this weekend, I will not allow myself to get into this position again. And the next weekend, you're in exactly the same place, overwhelmed, trying to cope, and just survive that weekend. Like Sisyphus, there is no end to our labor. Maybe for some of us here, it's a pile of dishes that pile up in the kitchen, and you finally attack them, and you scrub, and you wash, and you get rid of them, and you dry them, and you put them away. But lo and behold, in the morning, you come back and find it is back. Or it's that pile of clothes that you wash and you dry, you pin up to dry, you iron it, you fold it, you put it away, but lo and behold, within 2 days, it is back. And it just never seems to go away. There was a time I read an article about email zero or inbox zero. How many of you know that and have tried it, okay? Anyone here? Inbox zero. It was the idea that you manage your emails so that by the time you finish going onto Gmail or whatever, email program you use, you work through your emails, you do not let them pile up, you clear them all, you trash them into the first level trash, second level, third level, and you answer them, and by the time you're done, the inbox itself is empty. I worked on that in box zero. But I don't do that anymore. Because I found strangely that the more emails you answer, the quicker they grow. And I kid you not, guys, ignore your email for a month and nobody will write you anymore. Your emails, that's the only way you get to email zero. Okay? And I found, I answer, so I write to David over there. And David writes back and says, can you clarify on point number 4? And so I clarify on point number 4. Now he writes back his response and tells me, actually, you've misunderstood something here. So I write back and say, okay, tell me what it's supposed to be. And he writes back. And it doesn't end. And the more you answer, the more the train of email grows. So I finally reached a place where I decided 2 things about my inbox zero, okay? I do have inbox zero now. But number 1, I decided I will not answer email, okay? And I look at my email only once a week. And I respond to the very urgent. The non-urgent, strangely, when you don't answer it, it disappears. It goes away. It takes care of itself, okay? So I only look at my email once a week. But number 2 is I began to write to the people who I must be in communication with and tell them, please, if you want me to deal with something, send me a WhatsApp. Don't send me an email. I only look on my, at my email once a week. And I even wrote down as part of my signature, kindly expect that I will write back in about 2 weeks' time. Okay? So if you want to catch me, write me a WhatsApp. You know why I want to do WhatsApp? When you have to thumb type all your, communication, you don't go more than 2 sentences. Isha. Okay? So my inbox is empty and my WhatsApp are short. I can answer those quickly and it doesn't become a 10-page email that sometimes emails are. I gave up because emails are like Sisyphus. You roll it up to the top of the hill, and by the time you wake up in the morning, you find everybody's written again. I tell you guys, there are evil people. They will not let you alone. But this is where we are. We're bone tired, we're worn out, we're heading for burnout, but the stone keeps rolling back to the bottom of the hill. And this is where we are. There's a book written some time back. It's a book called 24/6. Okay? And it's a play on the idea or the word or the way we talk about 24/7, which means full time, all the time, there is no break. Okay? 24/6 was, in a sense, an attempt to address a question or the problem of 24/7. It's written by a book called Dr. Matthew Sleeth, and he writes about a 1990 study done by another medical doctor, Dr. Richard Wiseman of the British Council, and he sought to record how fast people walk in the large cities of the world. Okay? And then to correlate the results he got with how many of those people were suffering from coronary heart disease. Because he believed there's a correlation. So a number of years later, about 10 years later, the study was done again, okay? Same city, and they found that in the 10 years, people were walking faster, about 10% faster than they had done before. The speed of life is just becoming faster and faster. We're like on one of these, spinning tops, and they just keep going round and round and round and round faster and faster. People were walking 10% faster than they had done before. But there was also a correlated increase in the amount of heart disease that they were suffering with. We never stop. And our world is spinning faster and faster like a top. We eventually find that because we never stopped, we were forced to stop. And the choice we face even now is to choose to rest by stopping, or alternatively, our souls and our body will force us to rest when we're finally in hospital. It's been said, if you don't allow yourself to rest from your overly busy life, then illness will become your Sabbath. And your pneumonia, or that cancer, or your heart attack, or the accident you got into will create Sabbath for you. Our bodies cannot go on working like Sisyphus 24/7. We were not created to be slaves to work or slaves of technology. God created us and mandated us that of every 7 days, we would work 6 and we would rest, or we would stop 1. And to help us understand this, and there are 2 thoughts I want to share with you on this. To help us understand this, God himself rested on the 7th day. The story in the book of Genesis chapter 1 is that on the 6th day he created man, he created them male and female, both the man and the woman, and he looked on his creation and he said it was very good. And then you go into chapter 2, and in verse 2 it tells us, on the 7th day God rested. And he called it a day of rest. So 2 thoughts here. God demonstrated it to us. And moms, anybody who's been a mom here has had a small boy, small girl, kids, you know this. The dads also do know this, because in their desperation, sometimes this is what they'll do, okay? When you have to put your son of 2 years or 3 years to bed, and they don't want to sleep and they don't want to rest, especially afternoon rest. They don't want, and they're pleading, please, just let me play. Johnny is out there playing. Why can't I also be up there playing? And they really are fighting against it. Oftentimes what a mom will do is not only tell the child to lie down and rest, but also lie down with the child and go to rest herself. And the child, mumbles, grumbles, maybe plays with the mom's hair a little, but within 10 minutes, they themselves have fallen asleep. Now, the mom is not asleep, but she demonstrates to the child, who is argumentative and doesn't want to sleep, demonstrates to the child, Mommy's going to sleep here with you. Let's sleep together. And the little child falls asleep. God demonstrated the Sabbath to us. Why? Because he doesn't need a Sabbath. God doesn't get tired. It wasn't that he was worn out by 6 days of work and therefore he had to take a break and he declared this a Sabbath. He demonstrated the Sabbath to us for our good. And what makes that particularly pertinent is this, okay? If you follow the creation story, on the first day, God separated the waters. The second day, he separated the land. The third day, he separated, he separates and conquers the chaos. On the 6th day, the epitome of his creation, he created man, male and female, okay? And tasked them to subdue the earth and watch over it, rule over it. In other words, care for it. And then it says, on the 7th day, he rested. And what you probably have never seen when you've read that creation story is, man's first day was the 7th day. Man's existence started with the Sabbath. not work. Because we tend to assume that man also works 6 days, and therefore the Sabbath made sense to him. After 6 days of work, man is tired, so we declare the seventh day the Sabbath. No. Man's first day of existence was the Sabbath itself. In other words, the Sabbath is not about I was tired and therefore I needed to rest. The Sabbath was not about productivity and I've been very productive this week, therefore now I can take a break and, enjoy a little life before I go back to work the next week. The Sabbath day was a gift from God, even where we did not know or fully understand what it was. Because man had not worked. Man was not tired either. But God demonstrated the Sabbath as his first day ever for man. Let me put it a different way, okay? The Sabbath was a gift from God. It is not about you. It is not your day. It is God's day gifted to us out of his good heart. Sometimes we say, a Sabbath day is, a day when you rest so that you can be more productive than you would otherwise have been. It's not. That was never what God intended when he created the Sabbath for us. It was his day as a gift to us. Put it differently, the Sabbath is not about you. It is about God. It is his day, and he dictates what the Sabbath is to be for us who have been gifted so that we can enjoy the Sabbath. The long and short of this is, I want to teach you 4 principles today, okay, coming out of the Sabbath, so that you know how to manage your own Sabbath. And this is the first principle about the Sabbath, okay? The Sabbath is a day unto the Lord. And you see that over and over and over again when God talks about the Sabbath in the scriptures. It is a day unto the Lord. It is the Lord's day. It is his day to dictate and determine how it is to be used. It is not you who decides what to do with the Sabbath. And sometimes people say, I'm not really tired, so I don't need a Sabbath day. Others say, a Sabbath is really, I need to do something that I don't, normally do during the course of the week. So we just change what we do and we're as busy on the Sabbath day as any other day. Others say, I get bored when I rest. A whole day, what am I supposed to do about it? It's not about you. It is God's day. He decides what he wants done with his day. The Sabbath and the word Sabbath, the word that titled the Sabbath day, is the Hebrew word for cease. The Hebrew word for stop. That's what the Sabbath is. Stop from your paid work and stop from your unpaid work. Stop, full stop. And you may say, but what about going shopping? Shopping isn't really exhausting. Stop. Well, can I at least wash, my inner clothes and maybe a few, shirts and maybe a few blouses? Stop. What about finishing my calendar so that I can start the week? Stop. That's what the Sabbath is. Just stop. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 10, the 10 Commandments were given by Moses. Now you need to realize that the 10 Commandments are actually given twice in the books of Moses. The first 5 books of the Bible are called the books of Moses. It is believed that Moses was the one who wrote those books, that it was even the creation. God revealed it to him and he wrote it down. So in the book of Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. But in the 5th book that we call Deuteronomy, the name of the word, the title of the book, means Deutero or Dio, which is the second law or the second giving of the law. So if you look at Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5, they're almost the same. Almost the same 10 commandments given, okay? So the book of Exodus, chapter 20, the first giving of the law, we read, the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord, not to you, to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, or your daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigners residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath, the seventh day, and made it holy. God was saying, stop. And it's not just you. Anyone who works with you has to have their Sabbath day. The animals do not go out to carry loads. Everything that you have, stop. It's not meant to be about whether you feel like taking a break. I'm not tired. It's not about that. The Sabbath is not a matter of whether you're bored and don't want to stop what you're doing. It's not even a matter of catch up. I need to catch up so that I can get ready for the week that's coming ahead. The Sabbath is not even a day we stop so that we can be more productive next week. Keeping the Sabbath is a matter of whether you will obey God or not. There is no wiggle room. It's a matter of obedience. And not keeping the Sabbath is an act of rebellion against God. We do not keep the Sabbath because we feel tired. We keep the Sabbath because God has said, stop and obey. Obedience to God. Obedience to a higher authority than my likes, my wants, my dreams, my desires, or my boss. And the question for us is, faced with the Sabbath, will you obey what God has commanded you? So this is the first principle. At the heart of the Sabbath is obedience. At the heart of the Sabbath is stop. Stop the arguments. Stop trying to justify you're desecrating the Sabbath. Stop all the complaints and just obey me. But then there's a second principle that we draw out of what Scripture talks about the Sabbath. And this time I want to look at the second giving of the law, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 5, okay? Particularly verse 12 to 15. This is what it says. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. It's going to be almost exactly the same as Exodus chapter 20. But in Deuteronomy chapter 5, there's a slight difference. And this is after the slavery of the Jews to the Egyptians, when God finally liberates them and frees them after 400 years of slavery. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. On it you shall not do any work. This is repetitive, very similar to Exodus chapter 20. Neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner who resides among you or in your towns. And then this is the difference. So that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day, and in the second giving of the law, and to rest. This is a modulation on Exodus chapter 20. After 400 years of slavery under the Egyptians, slave masters who run them 24/7 and whipped them and made life difficult, God adds a new component to the Sabbath and says, not only are you to stop because I stopped, but you are to rest because I liberated you from your slavery. The Sabbath now was not just about stop and honor God as an act of obedience, but it was also now stop and rest. This is the second component of the Sabbath, that we add in rest so that we are not enslaved anymore. The Sabbath for the Israelites was a remembrance of the deliverance of God from the harsh taskmasters that they had and from the slave labor that they had to give. It was a period to rest and to rejoice at God's deliverance. Today, many of us have become enslaved by our work. We have willed ourselves back into bondage and slavery. We are controlled by the clock and controlled by the computer and controlled by the mobile phone. We are slaves of productivity. And we have no rest from our busyness. This is why the Sabbath is even more crucial for you and I. Because God has set us free. In some careers, our slavery to the desk or to the computer is glorified. And so you go to some offices and you find not only they have a Monday through Friday and maybe half of Saturday work week, but you find people there in the afternoon. You go there on Sunday. There are some people who are also working on Sunday, in the morning particularly. This is slavery. Guys, we have been freed by Christ from slavery. And it is for freedom that I set you free. And we are not to be slaves, particularly to work. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of a man, a prisoner, who was imprisoned and he was condemned to live in a dungeon that was underground with a steel grill plate as his door. And every day his jailer would come down and, open the grill gate, the iron cast gate, and he would hand him his food, and then he would lock the gate. And the man knew that for the rest of his life, this was it. He would never see the light of day again. He would never see the blue sky again. It would be the dungeon until he died. Well, one day, his jailer came down. No plate, no food, and came down, opened the gate. And he swung open the iron gate, and he told the prisoner inside, "You have been freed, you can go." And he turned around and he left. And he left the gate open. So the prisoner sat there and he thought to himself, I know I was condemned for life. I know I was never to be set free. Why would he come and tell me I'm freed and then leave the gate open? And the narrative in his head was that it's a trick. It's a trick. It's a trick because he wants me to walk out of here. Then I will be captured again, and they will beat me, and they will terrorize me, and they will hurt me, and accuse me of trying to, escape from the prison. And so he said to himself, I will not go. And even though the door is open, he remained in his dungeon and would not leave. I share the story with you to make this point. If you do not trust, you will find no rest. That man did not trust his jailer, and so he was not going to walk out of that dungeon. If you do not trust, you will find no rest. You can only rest to the degree at which you trust. If you don't trust that Jesus has set you free from the bondage of busyness, if you don't trust that his provision will walk with you and provide for you as you rest, if you do not trust that obeying him, he will watch over you and cover you, if you do not trust, then you will not obey and you will not rest. To not take the Sabbath is to communicate to your Lord and Savior, I don't trust your promises. I don't trust that if I obey you, I will keep advancing. I know the rule of this world and the corporate world I live in. It is because I go in on Sunday morning. It is because I'm here until 9 o'clock at night that my boss sees that, and he will reward it, and I will advance, and I will create wealth, and I don't trust that you will watch my back. If I take my Sabbath when everybody else is in the office, then I will be the one left behind. And so I'd rather disobey you and instead do what everyone else does and work on the Sabbath. Rest is only possible to the degree to which you trust. There are 2 times I have done one of those one and done things, okay? And the first one I told you about is when my wife and I decided for her 60th birthday that we were going to jump out of a plane on a parachute and, so we did, okay? It was the most horrible experience I have ever gone through. And I thought I would be the brave one and that I had to persuade my wife. And so I told her friends, I told our daughters, and everybody was cheering her on. And I think she came for the jump because everybody was waiting. And the place we went, they even, in the price you pay, they have a photographer who jumps with you and is video recording you as you fall, okay? And taking photographs. So they give you a CD at the end of it, okay? And if you go on the web and, type in a name and such, you'll see her CD. Mine you will not see. It was the most horrible experience I have ever gone through, okay? And when you go to the ground, one and done. I will never do this again, okay? And I wondered to myself as we sailed down, what foolishness overtook me to even think that I would enjoy this, okay? But it's not the only one. There was another one I did one and done, and I said, I will never do this again. And it was when we visited Universal Studio with my wife. And we decided to do the biggest, highest roller coaster that they had there. Okay? And to make it worse, we wanted the real experience. Peter, let me tell you, when you go to one of those roller coasters, in the US and, these really high ones, really fast ones, sit at the first car on the first seat. There is nothing ahead of you, okay? At least when you're seated at the back, you can see all the people who are with you, so you know you're okay because they look okay, okay? But when you're the first one, hakuna kitu. You approach a wall and, and then it goes, ving, and I screamed the whole way to the very end. And when I came off, my legs were wobbly. I think my bladder was almost about to go. And I thought, one and done. I will never ride another roller coaster. Now, at that point, one of my dreams died because I think the highest roller coaster in the world is, where is it? I think it's in the Mall of America. Somewhere in the north, okay, I can't remember where, and it has a well-known name. I had actually said one day I'm going to write that thing. Akuna, I'm not going back there. There is in Tampa, Florida, Kissimmee, Florida. There is also what is called a catapult, where they put you on a seat, and then the crankshaft pulls the seat. It's on rubbers, and it pulls it back, and it pulls it back, and when it's really tense, it lets go, twing, and you go, boom. Boom, boom, boom. I said, Akuna, if I can't stand a roller coaster, we're canceling that out. And now my wife had said she's not going to do. But I was determined that we go and do it. One and done. If you go on a roller coaster and you don't trust the engineering and design of the ride, you're suspicious about, will it hold, will it fall apart, will it crack? You don't trust the seat belts you wear. And you don't trust the science behind the gravitational centrifugal forces that, cause you to go around that circle and etc. upside down without falling off. You don't trust that. Then it will be the most difficult, the most senseless, the most, nerve-wracking ride you will ever take. And coming back to the Sabbath, if you do not trust the Lord to have your back when you obey Him, then you will not observe the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a matter of trust. Can I say enough and honor God and say, it's not all done, and Lord, I need you to come through for me, and trust that He will. So the second principle to observe in constructing a Sabbath is not just stop, but rest. The third principle is delight. Because in the book of Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13 through 14, God said, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find joy in the Lord. Think about that. How do I get to the place where I call the Sabbath a delight? It's something I look forward to. Oh my goodness, I can't wait for the Sabbath. It is a delight. Because that's what God tells us to call it. It's supposed to be a day of delight, a day of fun, a day of laughter, a day of overflowing joy, a day of feasting. And then in the Jewish traditions that they still observe, it is a day where you brought the best food forward for the Sabbath meal. And you lit candles even as you started the Sabbath. And you had friends to celebrate the Sabbath with you. And there was laughter, and there was merrymaking around the table, and there was friendship. It was never intended to be a day where you sit down watching the clock, twiddling your thumbs. And then finally you're saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It's over. I can go and do my work now. That's not what the Sabbath is supposed to be. It is to be a day of delight. You know you're keeping the Sabbath well when your kids squeal at the thought that the Sabbath is about to begin. When our children were very young, we went over to the Catholics out in Karen, near the Karen, supermarket, okay? And hidden, somewhere back there, going to St. Elizabeth School, there's a place where the nuns, if you go there and knock on the door, they talk to you through a small peephole. And you tell them, I want to buy candles. And they have these beautiful big candles. And we bought one that was something like about 3 feet tall, okay? And we got to a fundi and we made him make a base so that it could stand, okay? And every Sabbath, one of the girls in turn would light the Sabbath candle. And then they would set the table and get the food ready for our Sabbath meal. You know you're on the right track with the Sabbath if your children squeal at the Sabbath. Okay? Now, this is what the Sabbath is supposed to be. It is supposed to be a time when you delight in the Sabbath. The Sabbath should be your binge day. For all of those of you who are on a diet, it should be a binge day to enjoy good food or even a feast. The day you eat that dessert that you've been waiting for. Every Christmas, my daughter, my third-born daughter, makes us a Christmas pudding cake, okay? Beautiful cake. And it is not, you don't bake it. It's one of those that you set and then take out the oxygen and you soak it in, in rum. And for 6 months, it just cooks, slowly. That's what a pudding, Christmas pudding is about. It's like an extra special fruit cake. Every Christmas, she makes me one of those, okay? We wait for the time it will be unearthed and unwrapped and it will be cut and Christmas has come. That's what the Sabbath is supposed to be like. A time to enjoy. So much so that the Jews and the rabbis would tell people on the Sabbath, delight in your food, delight in your rest, delight in your wife. And they even counseled that the Sabbath day is a day to enjoy the gift of physical intimacy with your spouse. As a pastor, my wife and I share our Sabbath on the same weekday because it's not on Sunday. So we sleep in and we potter around the house, and the idea of the Sabbath is do nothing productive, because that's work. Okay, completely do nothing productive. You should have nothing to show at it. Today I did. Today I accomplished. Today I did nothing productive. Once a month, my Sabbath is spent with my stretcher bearers. And we always choma together, and we sit down from 11 a.m. in the morning, and we have lunch together, we choma together, and we finally finish at 3. But it is a time of laughter and cracking jokes and telling our stories, and there is no serious business at all. The Sabbath is a day for your hobbies, just for the pleasure of it, to bring joy to your heart. I have a list where I have written down all the things that stress me and all the things that fill me to the brim with a sense of joy and a sense of well-being. I work through this list on the Sabbath and not this one at all. To construct that Sabbath, I look for the things that I enjoy most, and that's what I'm going to do. My photography, which is a hobby. I've told you I love my dogs. I have 2 Bobels, big dogs. Each of them is about 90 kilos. And, they're the type of dog that, for a couple of you, like you, Pastor Liz, you're a snack if they decided to enjoy you. And I love them, and that's a day we'll play with them and, throw things so that they can fetch and take them for a walk because they feel me. And the good thing about dogs like this is, number 1, they have no marital issues. Number 2, I don't have to save their soul, okay? So I don't have to preach to them. They never complain. They don't gossip. They certainly don't need a job evaluation. I mean, this is why I can enjoy them on the Sabbath. They're just fun and play. This then is the third component of the Sabbath. The fourth principle of the Sabbath is in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23 and verse 3. God said, there are 6 days when you may work, but the 7th is a day of Sabbath rest. And then he goes on to say, a day of sacred assembly. He even instructs in another passage that you are to present yourself at the altar. In other words, the Sabbath is God's day, and he has called us to set aside a time when we worship him, we contemplate our freedom and what he's done for us, and we assemble together for worship. These are the 4 principles that should guide the way we construct our Sabbath. Stop and rest and delight and contemplate. So let me tell you a little secret. If I were not a pastor here at the chapel, I wouldn't come to church on Sunday. Now you're thinking, what a strange thing to say. Let me tell you why. Because I would want to go for the 5 o'clock Saturday service instead of Sunday. We have a 5 o'clock Saturday service. It's not here. It's near a town. It's at the Good Shepherd Church. And the idea of it is, I would want to finish my pre-Sabbath getting ready by 4 o'clock because the service starts at 5. And the first thing then I would do is to worship and contemplate God in his goodness. But then after church is over, my rest would begin in going back home, in having a Sabbath meal, in enjoying the evening, and sleeping through the night, waking up lazily on a Sunday morning. Because I've been to church, and I'm not going on Sunday. So waking up lazily to a cup of coffee, maybe to, times when we can just talk together with my wife as we wake up, and then we can sit down for a midday meal. And rest has truly settled in. I've contemplated, I have rested, and in the afternoon would be a season of delight where we get together with friends and we spend the afternoon together just enjoying our friendships together. So stop, rest, delight, and contemplate. I want to challenge you to go back home and think about your own Sabbath. What is it that you need to stop doing? Because what you're keeping is not a Sabbath. Because you don't stop. You try and excuse it before God and, rationalize it away, and it is not a Sabbath. Currently, because, of course, I can't, do the Saturday service and not Sunday. I'm a pastor, and so I'm at work on a Sunday. I have taken Monday and Tuesday off. And Tuesday is my Sabbath. But Monday is my pre-Sabbath, the equivalent of a Saturday where I run around, pay my bills, do the what shopping I need to do to get ready for the Sabbath and to ensure that nothing that would have come to spoil my Sabbath comes because I attended to it on Monday. And so my Sabbath begins in the evening, now that the day is done on Saturday, or rather on Monday. And I begin with rest and a meal and being at home and enjoying fellowship with my wife. And then we rest through the night. Wake up to a lazy Tuesday. And I engage in my hobbies, or sometimes we go out for lunch together, maybe go for a drive, maybe do a choma and have a slow meal and sit down and talk together. Occasionally, we'll have a Sabbath treat, maybe a chocolate or something, or even a dessert that we have bought together, and it's for the Sabbath, and we delight in God's goodness to us. And then in the evening, we take time to just be together. Now, my contemplation is on Tuesday morning, and at present what I'm doing to contemplate is I sit down from about 9 a.m. in the morning until about midday. Okay, about 12 p.m., so 12 noon, okay? And I'm using an old Catholic form of contemplation that some of you who may come from a Catholic background would recognize, many others may not. It's called the prayer of examine. And it comes out of the book of Psalm, chapter 139, verse 23 and 24, where the psalmist cries out to the Lord and says, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there are any offensive, or in the King James Version, any wicked way in me, and lead me to your way everlasting." An opportunity to sit down and examine and allow the Holy Spirit of God to examine your heart and examine your life. John Wesley and Wesleyans, as they began that particular, form of ministry or church, used to examine their lives in this way. And John Wesley had 21 questions that he would be held accountable for. And he would do this every day. I have a list of about 60 questions, so there are too many to go through in one session. But I sort of roll over little by little. 5 today, maybe 3 next week. It depends on what my response is. Sometimes I have a lot to write and journal about. Sometimes I feel the conviction of the Spirit. Other times, not as much, and so I move on. And these are the sorts of questions I examine my soul and my heart with. I've got just a small list. I could give you a copy of it if you needed me to do that, but I have just a small list. The first question is, did I disobey God in anything this week, or do something that the Holy Spirit made me uneasy about? Am I feeling convicted about something I said or did or watched or whatever? Secondly, how did Satan seek to tempt me this week? And did he defeat me? In other words, did I fall into that temptation in any part of my life? The third question, did I give the Bible time to speak to me every day? And did the Bible live in me through the week? Here's a fourth question. Was I unkind towards my wife or family members? Did I use an unkind tone or word with them? Here's a sixth question, and I get trapped in this one a lot. Did I treat the service personnel around me with anything less than honor and gratitude? Or did I treat them with arrogance and entitlement and in a manner that put them down? Did I apologize to them when I realized what I had done? And did I say sorry to God once I caught myself in this? And I just ask these questions and examine my life and allow the Spirit to speak to me as my form of drawing closer to God and also of living a pure life. Now, as we come to the end of the service, I've learned over the years, or rather these 2 years, as I have tried to get back on my feet after my burnout, that the Sabbath is a good principle to live by, and I do try and honor it as an act of obedience. It's a buffer of rest that keeps my life in balance. It is like healthy shock absorbers on a car that stop you feeling every bump, but instead make the ride smooth. But I've also come to believe that the Sabbath is not enough when you are living a crazy, busy life in this modern world. I'll finish off this series next week by examining something that I think goes beyond the Sabbath as I see it in the life of Jesus. And if I want to slow down from burnout and the crazy busyness that I have lived with, the Sabbath is good, but I need to go further than that. Let me give you an illustration of this. My teeth trouble me, okay? I think I ate too many sweets when I was young and sodas, okay? And so I've been to the dentist over and over and over again, and he's a good friend of mine, and we laugh about this when I go, because when I go to the dentist, one of the problems I have is he injects me with the injection they give to numb your gums and etc., so that they can drill for, cavities and those sorts of things. But it doesn't work on me. And so he gives me the first injection and then goes with that drill. And and so he gives me a second injection, and I'm feeling as though my lip is out here, and I can still feel the pain. So he gives me a third injection. He gives me a fourth injection. He has given me 5, and you're not supposed to give more than 4. By that time, I think I'm singing. But I still feel the pain. I still feel the pain. So we have an agreement with my dentist that, leave what isn't going on right now, and when it gets too much, I want you to admit me into hospital, I want you to put me under anesthesia, and I want you to work on everything. And I should not come and see you again in 5 years. I'll come after 5 years. And if I start having problems again, you did not do a good job. Now, we laugh about this because I tell him, you're the only person I pay to make me feel pain. Why am I even coming to you, okay? So I was last in hospital last year in May, and, he put in some pins and et cetera. And so I was there to see him recently, and he said, one of the pins that, he had put in and the bone grows around it, we are going to have to do some work on that. And so he started, and I was feeling pain. And I don't cry, but, you can see I'm holding the chair, almost breaking it. And I told him, doctor, these medicines of yours don't work for me. Can I be coming with Bangi and I sit in your reception and I smoke for a little while so that you can invite me to the seat? Because your medicines are not working. Can I bring my own Bangi? And he laughed and he said, no, we can't do that. But the long and short of it is, there is a medicine you take with Panadol and it takes care of the problem. But there are some pains that go much deeper than that. I've come to believe this is true of the Sabbath, that the Sabbath, when you're living a balanced life or almost balanced life, is perfect. But there comes a time when the busyness in your life is so crazy that you need to go much further than the Sabbath. And this is what I believe even Jesus himself would do. And it's what we call soul care. And so I want to talk about soul care next week and how the Sabbath can be complemented by attending to your soul in the crazy seasons. God bless you. Go and think about your Sabbath.